the first tray flew through the air and the whole room stopped breathing. That it wasn't thrown hard. It just slipped from someone's hand and clattered across the floor of the Rikers Island mess hall. But the sound, plastic slamming tile, echoed like a warning. Men turned. Officers froze. A red alarm blinked over the door but didn't sound. And there in the middle of the room, 2 lines of hungry men stared at the last pan of food, steam rising like a dare. Back to your seats, an officer called, trying to keep his voice calm. Nobody moved. A young man named Jamal stood behind the metal counter, both hands on a tray that held the last scoop of mashed potatoes. His stomach growled loud enough for the man next to him to hear. "You take it," the man said, eyes tired. "I'll wait." "But waiting is hard when you live by a bell." From the far table, someone said, "We got skipped again." Another voice answered, "You always say that." A third voice, steady, older, said, "Breathe. Don't add heat." That was Carlos, a man who wrote breathing numbers in a small notebook, in 4, hold 4, out 4, to keep his head from boiling over. Jamal lifted his tray. He looked left. He looked right. He saw the same things in every face: hunger, anger, fear. He took one step, and the lights flickered, the room went dim. The red alarm over the door blinked faster, but still no sound. A guard tapped his radio and mouthed, "Hold." Another reached for the wall switch. Jamal froze with the tray halfway to his chest. For one sharp second, it felt like the whole jail held its breath. This is the daily life at Rikers: food, fights, and fear, stacked on top of each other like trays in a tight kitchen. People think it's shouting all day and chaos every hour. Sometimes it is. But most of the time it's waiting and counting and trying to stay small inside a big, loud place. Now, let's rewind to the morning. Before the tray, before the lights, before the room turned into a matchbox, dawn came gray over the East River. The wind smelled like rain and jet fuel from the planes lifting off at LaGuardia. Inside the dorm, Jamal woke to the clang of keys and the click of counters. Count time. He watched the officer's pen hover over a paper, his name in a box, a tiny checkmark that meant he was still here. On the bunk below, Carlos sat up slow and rubbed his face. "Drink water," he said to no one and everyone. "We need it for the day." Jamal tied his shoes without laces. He folded his blanket into a square that almost looked sharp. He thought about pancakes from a diner near his block in Brooklyn and tasted syrup in his head. A TV up high showed a morning show with the sound off. All mouths. No words. Across the building, a nurse named Tanya sorted small paper cups of medicine and wrote "ask about sleep" in the margin of her list. In the officer's booth, Rivera checked the log: short staff, 1 camera fuzzy, kitchen running behind. He underlined the kitchen note twice: breakfast came late. Oatmeal. A piece of bread. Jamal ate slow to make it last. A man at the next table asked, "You think lunch will be better?" Carlos answered, "I think it will be lunch." He smiled a little, and that small smile gave the room a breath of air. After breakfast, the dorm spilled into its routine. Some men wrote letters. Some walked slow laps around the tables. Some stared out a small window at a sliver of sky. Jamal stood by the phones and waited for a turn. When his minute came, the line clicked and then went quiet. He stared at the metal mouthpiece. "Mom? It's me." Static swallowed the second half. He hung up and told himself, "Try again later." Later is a long word in a short place. Late morning brought a low moment. A rumor flowed through the unit like a cold draft: kitchen short today. Fewer workers. Fewer trays. Jamal felt a knot form under his ribs. Carlos opened his notebook and wrote, "Expect less, stay kind." He underlined "stay."
Around noon, a counselor stopped by with flyers for a quiet group. "You don't have to come," she said. "But if you need a place to breathe, we'll be in the library." A few men nodded. Most stared at the clock. The highs at Rikers don't come from joy. They come from pressure spikes, voices too loud, doors stuck, a rumor that grows teeth. Right before lunch, a shout echoed from the hallway, "Move it up! Move it up!" The line formed fast, shoulders tight, eyes forward. Jamal stood near the front. He could smell something warm and salty and felt that knot loosen a little. The mess hall looked like every mess hall. Metal tables, bolted benches, a serving line behind a low wall. A roll-up gate rattled open. Steam rose from the trays. The posted menu said chicken patty, mashed potatoes, greens. Jamal smiled at the word greens. He missed color. 2 officers stood by the door. Rivera took the corner near the camera where he could see faces, hands, pockets, eyes that moved too quick. He liked to talk calm when he could. Calm is heavy here. It takes effort to carry. The first 10 men got full plates. The next 10 got full plates. The next 5 got full plates. Then the greens ran out. The line slowed. A kitchen worker frowned at the pan. "Hold up," he said. "Wait for a tray from the back." The line did not like the word wait. It had already waited all day. A man 2 spots ahead of Jamal turned and said, "They always play with us." Carlos farther back said soft, "Breathe. Counting keeps the mind from slipping." He started, "In 4, hold 4, out 4. Jamal tried to copy him without moving his lips. It worked for a second. Then the tray slipped. The clatter jolted the room. A fork spun across the tile, flashing like a fish. The lights blinked. The alarm light woke up over the exit, red, 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 but the siren stayed sleeping. The men at the tables went quiet in a way that felt loud. The officers looked at each other, a quick yes no yes with their eyes. Rivera raised his hand. "Back to your seats," he said again, calm but strained at the edges. Jamal lifted his tray. The kitchen worker scraped the last spoon of potatoes toward him and whispered, "My bad, kid." Behind Jamal, someone said, "We going home hungry again?" Another said, "They'll bring more." "When?" "When the clock says tomorrow." A low growl rolled through the line. Not an animal sound, a people sound, tired and angry and scared all at once. Fear is not just screaming. Fear can be a whisper that pushes. Jamal turned to look for Carlos. He saw him at the end of the line with a small notebook closed in his palm like a shield. Their eyes met for a half-second. Carlos mouthed 4. Jamal counted, 1 2 3 4. The light flickered again. The red over the door started to blink faster. A radio crackled. The camera above the serving line flipped to gray for a breath and then came back. Rivera felt the air change the way a lifeguard feels the shape of a wave. He stepped forward. "Sit," he said, firmer now. "You'll get fed. We'll handle the back." He nodded to a second officer to go to the kitchen door. Someone at the table slapped a palm once like a drum. "We're not dogs," he said. "We're people." A few men answered, "Yeah." A few kept their eyes down. Most looked at the food like it might run away. In the far corner, the TV showed a news story with silent captions. "City says Rikers conditions improving." A man laughed without smiling. The gate to the kitchen rattled again. A cart appeared with more trays. Relief washed the front of the line, then hit a wall when the cart stuck on a cracked tile. The worker pulled. The cart didn't move. A wheel squealed like a crying violin. The room leaned forward. Rivera said, "Hold," to everybody and to the cart at the same time. Jamal stepped toward the stuck wheel without thinking. He bent to lift the corner. The worker nodded thanks. For a second it looked like a good turn might travel through the room and loosen every jaw. Then a voice near the phones called, "He cut the line." It wasn't true, but truth moves slower than a rumor in a hungry room. A chair scraped. A tray thumped. Bodies shifted. Carlos spoke loud and clear. "Count with me." He raised his hand like a street teacher. "In 4. A few men breathed with him. Jamal did too. "Hold 4. The room took a small breath together. Even the cart seemed to listen. "Out 4. For a heartbeat it worked. Jamal lifted the cart corner. The wheel bumped over the crack. Food moved forward. Then the alarm finally found its voice. A sharp siren filled the hall, bouncing off the metal tables, rattling the trays. Red poured over every face. The doors at both ends clicked. Locked. The camera above the line blinked back to gray and stayed there. "Back to your seats." Rivera shouted, louder now because the room was louder. His voice was still calm but it had hard edges. He touched his radio and didn't hear anything back, just static like rain. The worker with the cart froze. Jamal stood in the open where anyone could see him. The man who yelled, "He cut," pointed. Another man shook his head. He helped the cart. But the siren made it hard to hear anything soft. Carlos moved to the nearest table and put his notebook down like a flag of truce. "I'm counting," he said. "In 4. The lights dimmed to the red glow of emergency strips along the floor. A door at the far end thunked once, then again, like it wanted to open and changed its mind. Everyone looked the same way at the same time. Jamal tightened his grip on the tray and felt his hands sweat. Rivera took one step toward the center of the room, weighing a dozen choices he had made 100 times, knowing that one wrong word could tip a day into a night nobody wanted. A second alarm began to pulse under the first, lower, closer, like a heartbeat in the walls. The room held its breath again, waiting to see which way the day will break. And that is where we leave them for now, food inches away, fear inches closer, a fight growing in the space between hunger and rumor. While the doors stay shut, the radios stay quiet, and the red lights keep blinking faster, waiting to see which way the day will break. The siren stopped as suddenly as it began, leaving behind a ringing silence that buzzed in everyone's ears. For a second no one moved. Then all at once the noise returned, voices shouting, trays sliding, boots pounding the floor. The mess hall at Rikers Island turned into a storm made of sound and fear. Rivera's radio crackled back to life, faint but clear. Contain the area. Don't escalate. Repeat, don't escalate. He tapped his earpiece and shouted over the noise, stay where you are. Nobody moves until this clears. But his voice barely carried. Jamal still stood near the cart, the tray shaking in his hands. The red light above him blinked like a heartbeat. A man behind him muttered, "They gonna lock us down for this?" And the words spread through the room like fire through paper. Another man slammed his tray down. "Every time same thing," he yelled. "We wait, we get nothing, and then they say we started it." The officers tensed. Every step, every shout, every glance meant something here. One wrong word could tip the whole room. Carlos stood slowly, holding up his notebook. His voice cut through the noise. "Breathe. Listen to me. In 4. Some men turned to look at him. Others kept yelling. But a few, just a few, started to breathe with him. "In 4, he said again. "Hold 4. Out 4. It didn't stop the chaos, but it slowed it, like a storm moving just a little farther away. Rivera saw the shift. He motioned to another officer to grab the kitchen door. The worker pushed the cart forward, the smell of mashed potatoes and salt filling the air again. Plates began to move down the line. And just like that, the tension broke, not gone but buried under the noise of spoons and footsteps and heavy breathing. Still, something in the air said this wasn't over. Later that evening, Jamal sat on his bunk staring at the ceiling. His dinner tray, empty, rested by his feet. His hands still shook from the adrenaline. Across the dorm, men talked about the siren. Some said it was a drill. Others said someone had fought in another unit. Nobody knew the truth. Carlos sat nearby, sharpening a pencil with the edge of a plastic card. "You kept your cool," he said quietly. "I froze," Jamal replied. "Couldn't think." Carlos smiled, small and tired. "That's what thinking looks like in here. Freezing before you make it worse." The lights dimmed for evening count. The officer called out names. Jamal answered when he heard his. He stared at the floor, counting breaths like Carlos taught him. When the count ended, the dorm fell into the usual low hum of voices, coughs, and clinking metal. A man down the row said, "They say we're getting peanut butter tomorrow." Someone else laughed. "They've been saying that all week." A third voice said, "Don't matter. It's all the same when you're hungry." Jamal turned toward Carlos. "Is it always like this?" Carlos thought for a long second. "No. Some days it's quieter. Some days it's worse. The trick is knowing which kind of quiet you're in." The next morning breakfast came cold. The oatmeal had lumps like rocks. The milk was warm. But everyone ate anyway. Hunger at Rikers isn't just physical. It's the kind that sits in your chest and makes you think too much. After breakfast, Jamal was sent to work detail in the laundry room. The air smelled like bleach and steam. He folded uniforms until his hands went numb. Every shirt looked the same, every tag had a number. On the other side of the room, 2 men argued over a towel count. One said, "I ain't losing mine for nobody." The other said, "You lost it yesterday." Rivera walked in before it got worse. "Fix it," he said, not loud, not angry, just firm enough to remind them there were eyes everywhere. By lunchtime, everyone was back in the mess hall. The lights were fixed. The cameras were back on. The food looked the same, chicken patty, potatoes, greens, but the silence was heavier. The siren from yesterday still echoed in their heads. Carlos wrote something in his notebook between bites. Jamal leaned over. "What's that?" He showed him the page. "It's not the noise that breaks you here. It's the waiting." Jamal nodded slowly. "You ever think about leaving?" Carlos laughed once. "Every minute. But they don't let you go just because you want to." That afternoon an announcement crackled through the speaker system. All movement suspended. Remain in assigned areas. Everyone froze. Then came the second line, incident reported in Housing Unit C. The dorm fell silent. Every man turned toward the speaker, waiting for the rest of the message. But nothing followed. The static hummed for a few seconds and cut off. Rivera appeared in the doorway with two other officers. His face gave nothing away. "Stay put," he said. "No movement until further notice." A murmur rolled through the room. Someone whispered, "Another fight?" Another said, "Probably medical." Jamal looked at Carlos, who stared at the floor. "It's never just one thing," Carlos said. "It's everything stacked together." An hour passed. Then two. The air grew thick and hot. Someone banged on the wall once, then again. Rivera didn't react. Finally, the speaker clicked back on, "Incident contained. Resume normal operations." The dorm exhaled all at once. The noise started again, chatter, laughter, movement, but underneath it was something darker, quieter. Everyone knew what contained really meant. That night, Jamal couldn't sleep. He lay awake listening to the sounds of Rikers, the drip of a leaking pipe, the shuffle of footsteps in the hall, the buzz of a flickering light. He thought about the man in Housing Unit C. He thought about how close fear always sat, like a shadow just behind him. Carlos rolled over and said, half asleep, "You'll get used to the noise." Jamal whispered, "That's what scares me." The next morning Rivera walked the tier. He saw Jamal cleaning his bunk, quiet but alert. "You keeping out of trouble?" he asked. Jamal nodded. "Trying to." Rivera paused. "That's all any of us can do in here, try." He walked on, but his words hung in the air like the dust caught in the sunlight. As the day wore on, the rumor started to spread. Someone in C Unit didn't make it. Nobody said the word, but everyone knew what it meant. Jamal didn't ask questions. He just folded his blanket tighter and stared at the wall. Fear had a shape now, silent, invisible, heavy. It moved from cell to cell, from dorm to dorm, the same way hunger did. That night, when the lights went out, the only thing louder than the buzz of the fixtures was the sound of people trying not to think. And as the camera panned down the rows of bunks, across the tired faces and clenched fists, a single thought echoed in the dark. That here, in the island that time forgot, survival wasn't about winning fights or finishing meals. It was about making it to tomorrow, one breath, one heartbeat, one tray at a time. Then came the distant sound of an alarm, faint but growing, and a voice on the radio whispering, "All units respond to North Dorm." Jamal opened his eyes. The next storm was already starting.